I've seen the movie. It's a good movie, by the way. Julia Roberts won an Academy Award for that one.
Well deserved.
But yeah, I think when you actually get into the story and what was happening in Hinkley, California, this is tough.
Ever wonder what really happens when your rights are violated and what you can do about it? Ever wonder what the law looks like outside of TV dramas and headlines? Meet Quinn Mayberry, a Harvard-trained trial lawyer who has helped individuals recover millions of dollars, and Alex Lobert, Quinn's lifelong friend and your law translator-in-chief, here to make the law make sense. On this show, they cover headline-making legal battles and overlook cases to show you how to fight back and win. This is Legally Curious.
All right, Alex, picture this. So it's the early 1990s. We're in Hinkley, California, this desert town with about 2,000 people. Kids are swimming, families are gardening, and everything seems pretty normal. 1990s kind of Americana. Then these kids start getting nosebleeds, and people in the town start developing cancers, all kinds of cancers. We're not even getting consistency there. There's some reports, and it's unclear how trustworthy, but of frogs with two heads, and we get green water from taps. So for 14 years, Pacific Gas and Electric had dumped 370 million gallons of wastewater that's laced with this cancer-causing toxin that we're going to talk about later called hexavalent chromium into these unlined ponds that then poison the town's groundwater. So the person who uncovered all of this wasn't a lawyer. She was a single mom and file clerk named Erin Brockovich. I think a lot of people have probably seen the movie. And the case we're covering today is Anderson versus Pacific Gas and Electric Company.
I'll just start by saying that's a pretty grim picture.
That's tough way to start the morning.
Yeah, we should have booked this recording session for the afternoon.
Exactly, giving ourselves a little time to get into the day.
Yikes. Yeah, I mean, I've seen the movie. It's a good movie, by the way. Julia Roberts won an Academy Award for that one.
Well deserved.
But yeah, I think when you actually get into the story and what was happening in Hinkley, California, this is tough. This is one tough one to listen to.
Yeah, it really is. And so we're going to talk about some of the facts today. We're going to talk about the law and, why these cases can be challenging, but how they're, as we'll see, still winnable. Yeah. And then talk about some takeaways.
You started to set the stage, Quinn. Do you want to go so what's happening in Hinkley?
Yeah. Okay. So as we already said, Hinkley, California, it's a desert town, small town, and a lot of the families drew well water from their backyard wells, to use for drinking water and around the house. Their biggest neighbor and employer was PG&E, and specifically a PG&E natural gas facility a couple miles outside of town. And this whole thing actually started in the 1950s, so well before a lot of this comes to light in the 1990s. The station, this PG&E station, was using a known toxic chemical in order to stop their cooling towers from rusting. So back to that hexavalent chromium. And chromium comes up a lot in the litigation, comes up a lot in the movie. And it's for good reason, because there are two really common types of chromium you got to know about as we're talking about the case. There's chromium 6 and chromium 3. Chromium 3 seems relatively safe. Chromium 6 causes a bunch of cancers. So
you want
big
3, not 6.
Yeah, 3 okay, 6 no bueno. And so the water is contaminated, and these residents are drinking that groundwater. They're gardening with it. They're swimming in pools that are filled with it. So they're getting tons of exposure to this this hexavalent chromium, or chromium 6, the bad chromium.
So Quinn, just quick thought here. You're telling me that this has been happening for 30 to 40 years before the case comes? How do they figure this out? So what's happening? It's clearly like no lawyers were involved for like 30 years, which also feels kind of crazy.
No, it is crazy. And it's like, this perfect storm of, there's not a bunch of monitoring for environmental toxins back then. It's really hard to tell where this is coming from whenever you start to see some cancer popping up, but there's cancer everywhere. This perfect storm of issues until this file lands on Erin Brockovich's desk. So there's this real estate transaction happening in Hinkley. And like the specifics of this aren't totally clear, but the way it's portrayed in the movie, she has this real estate file. They're handling a matter for a client in Hinkley, which seems largely true. And in that file, there are medical records. And so people start asking, specifically Erin wonders, why are there medical records in this file? And the answer is basically PG&E is providing healthcare to some of the residents. And so the person who has the file just kept all of her PG&E correspondence in one place and gave it to the law firm that was going to handle her real estate transaction.
That is crazy. First of all, that is just like luck. Like, again, like these people, this has been happening for decades, and it's a random real estate transaction that like triggers this.
It's crazy. And I think it also speaks to the scale of what's happening here, where it's like they're providing healthcare to people in the town. They're trying to buy back a bunch of the property that's around the contaminated areas. It's like, if they were doing this at one house or with one property, they probably would have gotten away with it. But it's like, they are so enmeshed in this community in a way where eventually this crops up on a lawyer's desk or on Erin Brockovich's desk, and all of a sudden she starts poking around.
Right. It's almost like they might have known, Quinn. just throw that out there.
Look, we're not going to bury the lead on this one. They knew.
They were pretty sure.
Yeah, they were pretty sure. So, where do you want to take this? We can talk about all the reasons why they knew.
I say we talk about how Erin starts and goes poking around, right? Okay, so Erin gets this real estate document with medical records. And by the way, just to be clear, I've bought a few houses. Not normal to have medical recorts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know. Weird, right? I put my physical in with my closing documents. But
I want people to know the physical specimen they're working with.
Exactly. I want them to know, like, you live here, this is what you can get.
Exactly. Perfect blood pressure.
Yeah, right. Absolutely great resting heart rate. But okay. So what happens with Erin?
All right. So really uncommon. We've got the medical records. Erin starts poking around. So she drives up to Hinkley, starts kind of going door to door, gets to know community members, and the stories just get crazier and crazier. It goes from this thing where you're like, well, that's fishy, to starting to feel kind of undeniable that something's happening. Still not totally clear what exactly is happening at the moment, but something is happening. And then pretty early on, we see that PG&E has told residents that they used chromium 3. They say it's an essential nutrient and it's safe. So it's like, okay, they've got chromium 3. We know chromium is up here. Whenever people start talking about chromium in the water and raise a stink about it, the residents' response is, no, PG&E themselves told us they're using chromium. It's fine, but it's an essential nutrient and it's safe. So like nothing to worry about.
It's like vitamins. They're just adding, they're fortifying the water with vitamins.
Brutal. So we start seeing, all different types of cancers, nosebleeds, headaches, just this laundry list of medical symptoms that in their own right, again, might seem like unfortunate facts of life. But whenever you see these enormous clusters in this small town of 2,000 people, it seems undeniable that something's happening. And then you couple that with the fact that PG&E is trying to buy up property for sometimes as much as like 10 times the property value. And it's raising a lot of alarms.
So if a company is giving you a too good to be true offer, maybe like at least squint at it. It's like,
maybe this is too good to be true.
So they do attack this one head on, correct?
Yeah, eventually. So Erin goes around town, builds a lot of trust in the community. They get a bunch of plaintiffs lined up, and then eventually bring a case against PG&E.
I think what one just fast thing about like, okay, how do they line up the plaintiffs? So they basically, they know what's up, and then they
can do an investigation where they're talking to people who might have material information to an existing client's lawsuit. They can also give the community information and educate the community on, that their groundwater has been poisoned. They can scream that from a hilltop and let everybody know about it. But you can't go door to door and solicit clients. It seems like sometimes like a fairly arbitrary distinction, but it's like we don't want to have this situation where a bunch of attorneys are pressuring people to sign up for cases. And so the way they did this was, again, Erin went around town investigating this matter on behalf of an existing client. And then they also had it, the movie depicted it this way, and I imagine it's accurate. They had a bunch of community events where they would let people know what was happening in the town.
Yep, got it. So they drove awareness and essentially told them, yes, you are functionally being poisoned here.
Yeah. And it's like, by the way, here's something you could do about it. Like, your call.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And their call was, all right, let's figure out the litigation path. So what evidence do Erin and Ed actually get figuring out like, this is actually happening and this is PG&E's fault?
Yeah. So early on, there are these like Hinkley Water Board reports that show there is in fact chromium 6 in the water. And these reports had either been like downplayed or suppressed entirely, but there is some evidence from testing that there's chromium 6. Then they go and test a bunch of the groundwater themselves. They test a lot of this well water. We see chromium 6. Later on, they're testing individual plaintiffs, and you see chromium 6 in their DNA. So it becomes pretty undeniable that chromium 6 is present and at play. We still have some big outstanding questions as to like what has chromium 6 done, but it is there.
Got it. So they know. Fast aside here, by the way, because I think it's an important point for us to just spend a second on. It is really cool, and I think underappreciated, that oftentimes lawyers, in pursuit of finding if someone broke the law, aka PG&E in this circumstance, they were organizing all of this research, right? They're coordinating all of this happening, and they are actually helping drive towards the truth. So again, I think it's something that we both know, but don't know and don't appreciate as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And what we see is people who understand that an attorney can help them fight this out in court, but maybe don't fully appreciate the fact that an attorney can be involved in the original investigation of what's going on. There are also a lot of like state and local governmental bodies that keep information on things like the state of the groundwater. Also good places to start looking. You might be able to get some information yourself, but again, like an attorney can be such a good partner in that.
So we actually have the evidence. And what's the case? Like, how do you actually build a case here? What's the legal framework that they use to tackle PG&E?
There are basically, I guess, two things to think about. We've got negligence, which is really common for any type of injury case, where they've got to have a duty. They need to have breached that duty. That breach causes some sort of damage. So those are kind of the four components there. And then you also have this doctrine related to ultra hazardous activity, where if something like, launching test rockets or, storing nuclear waste, there are things that are so inherently dangerous that the idea is that forget about the duty and breach. Just by engaging in that activity, if it causes harm, you're on the hook for it. So it doesn't matter how careful you were. If it caused harm, you're responsible. So we have that strict liability principle for ultra hazardous activity. But for toxic tort cases, regardless of whether or not you've got strict liability because it is an ultra hazardous activity, or you have to go through that normal 4-step process of proving a negligence case, the biggest issue here is going to be causation. So in these toxic tort cases, the issue is typically causation. So you've got a bunch of people who have damages, that last element, a lot of people who have cancer, who are hurt. And then you also will typically have this behavior that's not good. Either they're using ultra hazardous materials and they have strict liability, or even if they weren't sufficiently cautious and safe with the materials that they had, and they're liable. So it's like those first two elements typically met, the damages, the fourth element typically met. What's almost always at issue is that third element, causation. So why is that so important? Tons of things cause cancer. It oftentimes is a lot of factors compounding over a lifetime. Oftentimes there's not enough research on the impact of these specific chemicals. A ton of things certainly cause headaches and nosebleeds, right? It's dry climate. And so it's, how do you get at that causation issue? And that's really kind of what's at play here.
Funny aside, I feel like when I first heard the term like toxic tort, I was like, oh, this is going to be something abstract. And it's like, oh no, it literally means like toxic. Like,
like a tort is like basically a negligence lawsuit. And then you're like, it's just a toxic one of those.
yeah, right. I'm like, it must be, right? Yeah. And then in the ultra hazardous doctrine, I'm like, people were very on the nose whenever they decided to name these. I don't know.
No
I appreciate
Latin names here. We called a spade on this one.
Yeah. Nuclear waste, bad. Okay, so they figured out now we've basically figured out, hey, we know there's probably causation. So what actually happens? This is pretty unique, right? In terms of how they actually move through the litigation.
And I'll say here, just because we have that study, it's not necessarily like a slam dunk causation argument. They've got a strong argument, don't get me wrong, but like, again, they're just these really high hurdles whenever it comes to causation in an environmental case like this. So the reason that matters is PG&E isn't totally throwing in the towel yet. They're still fighting it out on causation grounds. And then they're also fighting. So that's like their only real like substantive legal argument. There's this other issue, which is like procedurally, they're saying they're going to drown the other side in paperwork, which, if you've got a big enough law firm, the plaintiffs are prepared, isn't a problem. But then you've got this other procedural issue, which is a case of this scale could drag out over decades. And in the movie, they referenced the Love Canal disaster and how not a single plaintiff had seen a penny from that. And to address it, PG&E uses their leverage on dragging this out and some of the causation arguments to push it to arbitration. Our old friend arbitration. So there are some reasons arbitration could make sense in a case like this. Again, just like the timeline, but we've got a lot of the same problems where this is kept confidential. We're not getting like full transparency. The way they did this mechanically was the attorneys agreed to a high-low amount for arbitration. So they were PG&E was going to pay out at least $50 million and up to $400 million. And that was going to be decided by the arbitrator, the actual amount. They grouped the claims based on severity and like similarity of, the medical treatment they were going to need. They grouped them based on the similarity of the damages. And then they brought the initial batch of 40 plaintiffs and they won an arbitration award of, I believe it was $120 million, which then ultimately led to a settlement. So PG&E, they see the writing on the wall. They see an opportunity to offer some amount that's less than $400 million, but still pretty close. And plaintiffs accept $333 million.
Not bad. I appreciate how they go through the first 40 and they're like, yeah, we're screwed. like this is not going. We're going to hit that $400 million cap. So they decided to, right. They were like, all right, we're throwing in the towel on this one, so to speak. But 333 million, not terrible. Obviously, as you said earlier, I don't think any of us would, like, there's not a monetary amount most people would take to get cancer and have these kind of health outcomes. However, still a little bit of accountability.
A little bit of accountability, the tools to get some level of reprieve here where they can move away from this if they want, get medical treatment, so on and so forth. Yeah, definitely doesn't solve the heart of the problem, but a lot better than nothing.
Quinn, I think we've been a little too somber for this one. It's a brutal case, to be clear. So I would like to invoke our minute of indignance. Can I get 60 seconds up on the clock? All right. Let's go. Let's let him have it.
What the So they used unlined ponds despite knowing they needed to be lined. Talk about just like the world's easiest fix. They didn't tell residents for decades. Then they blatantly lied. They lied about it.
I know. Internal documents knowing about the contamination. Insane. 1987, right? They had a report about this contamination.
Well, it's also, we hit this in the Wells Fargo episode, but the gaslighting, they tell them it's chromium 3. They say, yeah, there's chromium, but this is good for you. Not only is it safe, it's like a vitamin.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, that one feels criminal. Like, I know we'll have a whole chat about that later, but yeah, the gaslighting about a carcinogen is crazy. And then, by the way, basically paying off the doctors. I know it's not exactly what they did, but like functionally.
And they just create these conspiracies and you're like, okay, so you needed to prevent rust. You didn't really know the impacts at the time. Then it's like, fucking own up to it. Grow up, line the ponds, get people out of there, let them know of the risk, and let's handle this like non-sociopaths. Like just a decent human being,
I agree. Okay. That felt good.
That might have been 2 minutes of indignance.
I know. We might have got 2 minutes there.
Yeah. By the way, let's take 1 second and talk about the criminal versus civil implications here, where, you and I were saying a lot of this felt criminal and frankly probably was. One of the plaintiffs said she was really dissatisfied with the way this played out, in large part because there wasn't this civil trial where they were held accountable in open court and then faced criminal consequences. So wanting them to be held accountable in open court, completely understand, and that's what would happen in a civil trial. What wouldn't happen is there wouldn't be criminal prosecution. This is like a super common misconception. It's a totally separate proceeding. And by the way, the criminal prosecution is being brought typically on behalf of the state that you're in, or maybe by the federal government, but it's not being brought by the individual victim. And also the individual, doesn't really have any say whether or not that prosecution comes forward. You hear about like they dropped the charges against them, or the person decided not to press charges. It's the prosecutor deciding whether or not to press charges. The person might not cooperate. The victim might not cooperate with the prosecution, but they can bring charges even if the person doesn't want them to. Meanwhile, the person might be desperately asking prosecution to bring charges, and they might choose not to. So it's like, just wanted to call out that clear distinction, because this is something that I see confused a lot in like Hollywood and in public perception. But
it's a great clarification, and I agree. Some of this does feel criminal, but to your point, it's the state or the federal government's decision whether to bring those charges. But people.
Last point on that, though, they do consider like the political pressure. So if a bunch of people are, upset about this and outraged, and there's like organized groups that are saying this needs to be prosecuted, it's something that weighs into that calculus. But
yeah, absolutely. But people can bring civil charges.
100%. And that's where individuals can get some level of accountability and some level of justice.
Right. Speaking of that, what does this actually mean for us? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for you? What are some practical takeaways from this case?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like first and foremost, if you've been following along with the podcast, corporations just might gaslight you. They might aggressively lie to you. Not trying to create this boogeyman out there, but it's just like, it's these situations where they blatantly lie. And so you think, well, surely that can't be happening then. It's not like they're tiptoeing around the issue. They're saying it's not happening. Of course, they can't be lying about that, right? And then we see time and time again that they are. And so I guess all of that to say, you don't need to be paranoid about this, but trust your instincts. And if you have a question about what's going on, it's probably worth probing a little bit deeper. Some of this information is publicly available through local water boards, through regulatory bodies, but it can also be a really good idea to reach out to an attorney who has experience with this type of stuff. Because, I mean, as you mentioned earlier in the episode, they can sometimes help with that first order question of assessing whether or not there's probably a case to begin with, or helping with some of the investigation to see what's going on.
Right. You don't already have to know that someone broke the law to talk to a lawyer. You can, to your point, you can have concerns, and then lawyers can help you figure that out. Lawyers are actually your friend in this scenario, which I think is actually a really important point.
Yeah, I mean, said so much more succinctly. What's new, Alex?
Yeah, I'm a marketer. That's what I do. A marketer and a lawyer walk into a bar and probably make a podcast.
And it's called Legally Curious.
It's called Legally Curious. Yeah, this one hit close to home. I'll kind of end it with this, Quinn. I feel like I've seen the movie again, going back to the case and reading about it prior to this discussion. We're from a small town. Yeah. We're from a town of about, 17,000 people when all the students were there, fewer when they weren't, maybe 12,000. Yeah. And there is a little bit that I feel like I look at something like this happening and I go, hey, there's like this was just luck, right? Yeah. It's bad luck for them. It's good luck for us that this didn't happen in our town. I don't know. It hits close to home, but at the same time, I guess I'm happy there was some level of accountability, but also like you're kind of broken by the fact that a bunch of people's lives were really, affected by this.
Totally. And I feel like we're oftentimes able to bring some level of like separation and levity to the episodes. This one, I don't know how good of a job we did, because it is like this entire community decimated. And then, we're not even going to touch Flint, Michigan for what?
We're doing that one season 2.
Season 2.
Season 2 we'll get to Flint. So we need a break from these kind of cases.
100%. Nevertheless, it was good talking to you about it. Follow up with some comments and some questions. We're here to try and answer them.
Absolutely. And keep trying to fight the good fight. So, all right, Quinn, have a good rest of the day, man. I'll catch you later.
You too. Later, Alex.
If your rights have been violated, give Mayberry Law a call at 310-776-3764. It's free, and we would love to discuss what you can do. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice or create an attorney-client relationship. For specific legal guidance, consult a qualified attorney.
Dude, that was a rough one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we were just talking about it. It's like that was a heavy episode, a tough episode to make light.
It really was.
You're reading the facts and you're like, a town full of cancer. We couldn't even dive into a lot of the individual stories on this one just because it's like we were worried people would click off. We were finding ourselves disengaging.
I know. We're gonna try to make these fun, and that is that's really what we're trying to do. But yeah, that was tough. Like it really was. And I think like there's a human moment where you look at it and you go, okay, how do you tell a story that people want to actually listen to that is also, again, like does right by like a really challenging set of facts.